Our young men, Caleb and Andrew, is going to have our special music today.
Happy Sabbath. I just Probably should say that a couple times during the sermon just to make sure everybody stays awake, right? Let's have a word of prayer. Lord, it's a privilege to be here. It's an honor to be here. And we'd like to live to your honor during the week. We'd like to worship you truly on Sabbath. Well, through the week as well, Lord, but this day was devoted for that. We just pray that you'd help us to, as we come into your presence, to learn what you have for us to learn, to get the encouragement, the strength, the guidance that we need, and also the fellowship, Lord. I think it's important to have that, the social connections. And we pray that you would bless us with your presence here today as well, for Christ's sake. Amen. Give me a second. I have a small little issue to resolve. There we go. Okay. So I promised you last week that we would be talking, I'd be giving you a mission report this week. And next week, do you remember what we're doing next week? Anybody remember? Bible study. We'll be talking about how to actually how to study the Bible yourself personally, and then how to use that in preparation for studying the Bible with somebody else, or in preparation for giving a worship talk or a sermon, so forth. So this is this presentation here is basically a mission report. I will have several stories, and because I do train missionaries, I'm going to start with a little training, okay? Just a little education, so you'll know why we went to New Guinea and what I was trying to accomplish over there. And then the very last, so we have a little education at the beginning, then I'll show some pictures and I'll tell some stories, give them a more formal report. And so that's what you've got coming. So the first slides, education. Second series of slides is the report. So we'll start with little education. We have two Bible verses there. You see Acts 3, 7 to 10, and Acts 14, 8 to 13. And I selected those because they give the same basic story, but in two different locations. Like the same event takes place, two different locations, and people respond quite differently. So let's, if you want to, just if you have a Bible with you, and you can see in the semi-darkness we've got here. We're looking at the book of Acts, and that'll be a little warning for me. Heads up next time, if the lights are going to be off, print the text up there. So we'll start with Acts chapter 3. You're familiar with this story. It's not a new one for you. If you look at verse 1, Peter and John went up together to the temple at the hour of prayer, which is it says the 9th hour, which would be what time? 3 o'clock in the afternoon, because their sun basically came up at 3, went down at 3, and so they started time when the sun came up. That was the 0 hour, and the sun basically went down around the 12th hour because they used a sundial, and so 9 o'clock would be about 3 hours before the sun went down, which would be roughly 3 o'clock. So a certain man, lame from his mother's womb, was carried, whom they laid daily at the beautiful gate, which is called, the gate of the temple, which is called Beautiful. So it says the man was lame from his when? From birth, right? And how does he get to the temple? Somebody carries him. This is they. So he probably family members carry him to the temple. And what's his job at the temple? He's asking for alms. Alms refers to what? the gifts, right? He's asking, he's begging, in other words. Okay. Who's seeing Peter and John about to go into the temple, he asked for alms. And fixing his eyes on him with John, Peter said, "Look at us." So he gave them his attention, expecting to receive something from them. Then Peter said, "Silver and gold I do not have, but what I do have, I give you. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, rise up and walk." So what did the fellow do? He took him by the right hand. So Peter's helping him out, gets him by the right hand, and what? Lifts him up, right? Lifted him up, and immediately his feet and ankle bones received strength. So he, leaping up, stood and walked and entered the temple with who? Peter and John, with them. He goes in there with them. So they're going in there to pray. He goes in there with them, walking and leaping and praising God. And you can imagine, he's been crippled and unable to walk since birth. He's never walked in his whole entire life. Now this is his first chance to walk, and what is he doing? Everything you can expect a child to do, this guy's doing. He's jumping up and down. He's like stretching these things. He can't believe he can actually do what he's watched everybody else do for all these years. He's doing it now. He's doing it now. All the people saw him walking and praising God. Then they knew it was he who sat begging alms at the beautiful gate of the temple, and they were filled with wonder and amazement at what had happened to him. This fellow, he also was filled with wonder and amazement. It says he was praising God. Okay, so I'm going to stop right there. We could go on. I wish it would be a great sermon topic sometime to go on and just to look at how people responded to that. But the Jewish leaders responded to that. Instead, we're going to flip over a few more pages. Now we're going to look at Acts chapter 14. Yes, sir.
Are you going to I thought you were going to show pictures at the beginning.
I will. I'm going there.
Oh, okay.
I'm going there.
Well,
Don't.
He could turn the lights on so we could see our Bibles.
Okay. So he's asking if we could turn the auditorium lights on just for a few minutes here. Okay, so if you look in Acts 14, we're looking at 8 to 13, starting with verse 8. Now, this is Lystra. Paul and Silas are in Lystra. Why are they in Lystra? Because they've escaped from Iconium, where they tried to stone him, right? But they did not succeed, so they left, and now they're in Lystra. In Lystra, a certain man without strength in his feet was sitting a cripple from his mother's womb. So same story as we read in Acts chapter 3. There's a fellow there. He's handicapped ever since birth. Never walked before. Okay, since birth, never walked. So he points out who had never walked. Verse 9, this man heard Paul speaking. Paul, observing him intently and seeing he had faith to be healed, said with a loud voice, "Stand up straight on your feet." And he leaped and walked. Again, a fellow who's never walked before, never been able to stand up. First time he stands up, and what does he do? He didn't just stand up, he what? He leaps, like he jumps, like he's up in the air, this fellow. He's like so excited. He said he leaped on his feet and began walking around, just trying his feet out, just seeing what this is like to be able to walk. And I can imagine if it was me, I'd be doing the same thing. Okay? Leaped and walked. When people saw what Paul had done, they raised their voices, saying in the Lycaonian language, "The gods have come down to us." Okay? In the likeness of men. And Barnabas they called Zeus, Paul they called Hermes, two different gods, because he was the chief speaker. And the priest of Zeus, whose temple was in front of their city, brought oxen and gardens to the gates, intending to sacrifice with the multitude. Sacrifice to who? To Paul and Barnabas. They're going to sacrifice them. They think they are gods. Okay? They're going to sacrifice them. But when the apostles, Barnabas and Paul, heard this, they tore their clothes and ran in among the multitudes. Okay, so then if you back up and go back to chapter 3 and you ask yourselves, what was Peter's response after he healed them? People are surprised. What does Peter do? Peter says, oh, listen, don't think we did this. We didn't do this. God did it. Jesus actually did it. And he begins preaching to them about Jesus, whom they had recently crucified. Right? He says, in his name that this happened. What does Paul do? Paul says, ran in among them, crying out and saying, men, why are you doing these things? We also are men with the same nature as you. So Peter said basically the same thing. Paul, same thing. We're just humans. And we preach to you that you should turn from these useless things to the living God, who made the heaven and the earth and the sea, all things that are in them, who in bygone generations allowed all nations to walk in their own ways. Nevertheless, he did not leave himself without witness, and that he did good. Gave us rain from heaven and fruitful seasons, filling our hearts with food and gladness. And with these sayings, they could scarcely restrain the multitudes from sacrificing to them. So you see Peter, he's in Jerusalem, heals a man, and he begins preaching to him immediately about Jesus. Paul heals a man. He's in a foreign city, a pagan city. And once he heals a man, what does Paul begin talking about? He begins talking about God. And where does he start? Way back at creation. Way back at creation. So Peter, in Jerusalem, he begins his conversation with Jesus and goes straight to the point. You crucified him. You shouldn't have. He's the one where you get the power for this raising of the dead. And he starts preaching about Jesus. Paul, he starts talking about God the Father, and he begins way back at creation. What made the difference in what these two gentlemen preached about? Their audience, right? Okay, so what made the difference in how the audience interpreted the healing? Because it's the same healing. The same thing takes place. A man who's been crippled since birth, he's healed, now he's on his feet. Both cases, same thing. But in these two locations, the surrounding people interpret that completely differently. Would you agree with me there? They interpret what happened completely differently. Why? Yeah, they interpret differently based on their prior beliefs, right? Okay, based on their prior beliefs. So our cultures and our prior beliefs has a lot to do with how we interpret what we hear and what we see. Okay? So I just want to stop right there. I'm going to flip through a few slides here. And I'm going to start here with a basic explanation of what Christianity is. And our starting place is home culture, right? So we have our home culture here. And in this case, home culture would be the United States. In the story in Acts chapter 3, the home culture was Jerusalem. Okay, so we've got our home culture there. And I'm going to place a little dot in the middle. And what that dot represents is how people think. And if you live in a culture long enough, you learn to think pretty much like everybody else in the culture, right? And that's, even if you can argue, well, I'm a Christian, I don't think like everybody else. That's true. But you still shop at Fred Meyer's. Do you still use cash? Do you still go through the same process? You get your product, you put it in the shopping cart, go through a line. There's a huge portion of our local culture that we've embraced, right? Even as Christians, we still live in the same location. So we learn to think the same. Okay. And I had this line across there, basically to differentiate between that circle there, which is you inside of your home culture, and another culture, which we're going to walk across on the bottom. So I just want to draw a line there saying we're going to compare two different cultures. Right now, we're on the top. So we got the missionaries' home culture there, and you can see United States on the top, foreign country on the bottom. And if you want to, just for fun, say, okay, United States, we're going to go back in time a little bit. Farming community, everybody milks cows by hand. Every single morning you milk cows every evening. And then on the bottom, another culture here, we've got the foreign country. We're living with tribal people now. They live in a hunter-gatherer existence. If you don't gather food, you don't eat. A good friend of mine was spent, some time out there. And he said, look, I visited them, and they came to talk to me. And for 3 days we visited together. And for those 3 days, nobody ate. Because if they don't gather food in the morning, they don't eat that day. So if we're having meetings for 3 days, we're fasting for 3 days. Okay, so two different contexts right there. And we're going to shift over. I've put 2 lines here just to separate that off, and we're going to walk across that line in a minute. And I've just mentioned this line here, change of environment and cultural context, and the the perpendicular line is a change in worldview or how you think. And so we're going to move across this side here from the missionary's home culture on this direction. We're told, go make disciples, teaching them to observe all things I've commanded you. And we're also told, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So we're going to learn to think different and act different as we become Christians and cross this line. So still the same context, still living in the United States, but we're going to learn to think different and we're going to learn to act different because we're disciples of Jesus, right? So we're going to do that. And so we have this other circle over here, and this represents the Christian culture and a Christian worldview. Thinking different, living different. We've crossed that line right there. And that little arrow, what would you call that when you shift over there? Discipleship. Learning to think like Jesus, act like Jesus, follow his teachings. We're making that shift. So to speed things up, I just want to mention that happens. We start off with people who are not Christians and they don't know about God. They learn about God. We disciple them and we teach them this is how Christ taught us to live. This is also how Christ taught us to think. And quite often we wrestle with that kind of stuff in the Sabbath school lesson, how God wants us to think and to live our lives. We make that shift. And if you were a group of missionaries and I was teaching you about how to actually help people with that process, we would warn you of the dangers of stopping in the middle somewhere, because that quite often happens. People start off in their home culture thinking, acting like everybody else. They begin that discipleship journey, and then they're dropped in the middle somewhere. And they don't really know. They get started, they start coming to church, but they never actually learn how to take Christ's teachings, put them into practice in their lives, and actually live like Christ taught. They get stopped in the middle. And so they're like 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and that becomes home base for them. And we have a term for that. What do we call that? Syncretism. Okay, it's syncretism. You're blending the two together, and you're calling that Christianity. You haven't actually left the old world completely. You just barely leave a little bit, start getting in the church, and you stop there. So you don't actually complete that journey. So we won't discuss that at this point other than to mention it happens. Okay, so now we're going to look down here in this lower left-hand quadrant, and we have, another culture and another worldview, another completely different way of thinking. Okay? And I can tell you, living in PNG, it's quite fascinating. You don't really understand how different they think until you show up in a community where no one's wearing clothes, right? And then you realize, okay, they don't think the same as I do. Or they have a grass skirt, and that's all anybody wears, and the lady has a few necklaces on her around her neck. And as you talk to her, you realize that her mind, those aren't necklaces. In her mind, it's a shirt. That's what she's wearing to be modest. These few little beads here. You take it off, she feels immodest. As long as those beads are on, she feels like she's fully dressed. People are perceiving things differently. Would you agree, right? Yeah, and I look at my skin, it's pretty clean. I'm not talking about the color. Well, you can talk about the color too. I look at it and say, well, I was born with white skin. They look at me with white skin and they immediately assume I came from the world of the dead. I'm one of their ancestors. And I've had people come to me and ask me, can you tell me how my wife is doing? She died about 3 weeks ago, and I've just been wondering, like, how could you just tell me how she's doing? Like, I'm saying, well, I'm just a person, right? They're saying, no, it's not just a person. It is someone coming back from the dead. Okay, and I look at my skin, and I say, well, it's white, but it's pretty clean, right? And I clean it on a regular basis. I've seen people that looked like they were wearing feathers. Their entire body, white, and it looked like feathers everywhere. But it's not feathers. They have a fungus infection on their skin, and the skin is just peeling off in huge flakes, and their entire body is just covered with it, right? So literally, you just look at it and say, oh, they've got feathers, right? But they don't. It's not feathers, it's fungus, right? So, people who live in that environment don't think the same as we do here. Is it a fault of theirs? No, it's not a fault. It's just the environment. They're living in a different environment. And that environment shapes how they think and how to live in that environment. The snakes and the crocodiles and all the rest of the things that they have to face. It shapes how they think, right? So do these people down here think the same as the people up there? No. Does how people think impact how they interpret what they're seeing and hearing? Yes or no? Yes. It did it in the Bible times, and it does in today's times. Now, if it impacts how people interpret what I say and how they interpret what they hear, should it impact what a missionary says and what a missionary does? Yes or no? Absolutely. Absolutely. Because what I say and do here, you'll interpret it one way. I can say and do the exact same things somewhere else. They're going to interpret it differently. And if you're a missionary, what you say is completely irrelevant. What's important is what they hear. Because if I say God loves you, therefore He does not want you to smoke because smoking causes cancer, if they hear that and they interpret it as saying, oh man, God must hate people who smoke, therefore He vengefully gives them cancer, right? So I can say it thinking they're going to hear love, and they can hear it hearing what? Vengeance, right? So, I say one thing, they hear something different. So it makes a difference, right? So we have to be extremely cautious. So we have two worlds right there. A worldview up there, worldview down here, culture up there, culture down here. And we created a model of discipleship to help people move from the number one, you see the little one, to go to two, right? We want to have a discipleship model, helps people in this culture to move over here and learn how to take Christ's teachings and apply it in that context. Okay, ideally, when you begin missionary work down here, what would you like to do? Same thing, right? To help people down here to learn what are the teachings of Christ and learn how to apply those teachings of Christ in their context. Correct? Okay, that's the objective, right? So we can, a little diagram there, take teachings of Christ, offer them to them there, and then we can disciple them so they can learn how to take those teachings and apply it over here in this context. So that's ideally what we're looking for. So one of the challenges we face is that the people helping him with that discipleship, where do they come from? Where do they come from? They come from way up here. So what's the natural thing for them to want to do? What's a natural thing for them to want to do? Yeah, is to assume that this is Christianity. And it's relevant. Right? This is relevant Christianity. So we moved down here, and if you were a bunch of missionaries, we'd spend a couple of hours, several hours, wrestling through this, because every time you cross a line, it creates stress. So the new believers, when you first go from quadrant 1 to quadrant 2, as you're learning how to become a Christian, it's stressful. Diet changes, whether you drink or not, that changes, and it can be extremely difficult to quit drinking. All your friends start changing because, your habits change. So there's a lot of stress involved in that. And when missionaries come down here, you're crossing two lines. Major worldview difference and a major culture difference. So there's a lot of stress there. And a lot of missionaries, they give up after a few months. They have culture shock and they can't handle it and they want to go home. So, so there's the missionary stressed often when he comes down here. And he thinks to himself, I just want to help them to become Christians, right? And his confusion, his model of Christianity is that. And if these people will start acting like people back home, the missionary is going to feel very comfortable, very happy. He's going to feel like a success. It happens. And so then what he wants to do, right? He wants to take this model of Christianity that he felt comfortable with back home and offer it to these people over here and say, if you would do this, right? And so what time do we start our Sabbath school on Sabbath morning? About 9:30. You know why? Because 100 and some years ago, the early Adventists, a lot of them were farmers. And farmers had to milk their cows on Sabbath morning. And if they waited until 9:30, it would give everybody a chance to finish the milking, eat breakfast, and then still come to church. Are we still worshiping at 9:30? Yes. Okay. Is it because we're still milking cows? No. So if we go over to this other completely different country, and it's blazing hot in the middle of the daytime, when would be the best time to start church services? Probably early in the morning. So, but what the missionary that's coming over there, what time does he want to start church? What time? 9:30. He wants to start at 9:30. So, it's really easy just super easy for this to get moved down here from the very beginning. And never anybody to even consider what's the best time of the day for local people to worship when it's not hot. Right? We just take that model, bring it down here. Okay. So one of the challenges that I'm wrestling with currently, I'm working with the division, working with the P&G Union Mission. What we're trying to do is back up a little bit and ask a few questions, such as, what's my next slide here? Okay. We're asking the questions, how can we do this? If we're moving over here, ask a few more questions. We have believers there now. In fact, those of you who have heard any of the recent news, a couple months ago, just at the same time my wife and I were going over to New Guinea, they had this massive evangelistic campaign. When I say massive, it's unprecedented. They had thousands of evangelists working over there. I think they took Doug Batchelor's, sermons and then gave them over there to people in New Guinea. And 300,000 people were baptized, single day. So again, that's unprecedented. The numbers are off the charts. But the division and the union and AFM, I was there last year and realized that we had done a lot of this thing where we just moved church down this way, and we were using evangelist doctrinal presentations that did not address people's questions. For instance, we have a doctrine of the state of the dead, right? It answers the question, what happens after you die? Okay, and we asked that question because there's a lot of people that believed in purgatory and spirits coming back to life after the dead and talking to people. So there's a lot of questions we had about that. Is that true or not? Right? And so we answer that question. We have a doctrine relating to that. But what if your culture is far more concerned with what caused the death? Was it sorcery? Was it an evil spirit? Was a nature spirit angry? Did you make too much noise when you went by a cave, and therefore the spirit made you, did someone curse you? Is it a generational curse? Like, they have a whole different series of questions relating to death. Is it possible that we can give the doctrine on the state of the dead, and yet people still be confused as much as they were before? Is it possible? Yeah, and even believe the doctrine. Believe 100% of the doctrine and still be confused. Yes or no? Yeah. It is. It's possible. So what we are asking is, how can we help to better understand what their questions are, right? And then help them find answers for their questions, right? And help them address the confusion that they're wrestling with. Okay, that was our question. And so we've begun a process of spending a lot more time focusing on that, doing a little research. We got more people involved, and we're trying to develop a evangelistic model that serves these people, and then an entire discipleship process that helps native Papua New Guineans in their journey to know what are the teachings of Christ and how they can apply them in their lives and in their context. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. That's what I was doing. My wife and I both went over there, and that was our job, is just trying to begin the very first steps in this project. Okay, so you know why I went there now. And my wife went with me. I asked her probably 20 times to please consider coming with me, because quite often what happens is men go over there. Men do whatever they're going to do, ask the questions of other men, and who gets left behind? Women. Women have questions, they have things that they're concerned about that they can't discuss with men because of tribal rules. And so what happens is that the women, their questions and concerns don't get addressed. And I beg my wife, look, if you don't come, it's going to same thing happen again. We want to make sure that the ladies' concerns are addressed. We have a record of them. And then when we work on an evangelistic model, that their concerns are being dealt with inside that model, right? So that was the burden, and that's why she went to assist. Okay, so all right, so I'm going to leave this behind, and I'll share a few pictures with you. Yeah, okay, so here's, we went to 3 different locations. Very first location, this is where our adopted son Eva lives, and they're preparing food. And this is supposed to be a video. I don't know how to make it play. Once I put it in a PowerPoint, it got stuck, so there's no video there. But it basically shows her, that's a piece of bamboo she's holding in her hand, the lady in the very front. With the strawberry-colored shirt. She rips this big piece of bamboo apart, and inside of it, this is not the typical bamboo. I'll just start. Most bamboo, the sections are about this far apart. This is the different mambu, and it's thin-walled, and it has really long sections. I'll use it to carry water, and they also use it to steam food. So they'll put food in there. They'll put weeds or ferns back in the end to where her hand is now. They'll stuff that with ferns, and then they'll just throw it on the fire, and they'll keep turning that piece of bamboo, and all the food cooks in there. And if you've never eaten mambu food before, you're missing out. That is really good. When she pulls this open, my favorite kind of banana is it's a banana that's isu. It's a yellow banana. It's almost orange. If you wait till it's ripe, it's like you're eating candy. And anyway, she's got that. There's a pot of more bananas, and that's a tree leaf there. And by itself, that tree leaf can be kind of slimy. My wife says there's a way to cook it where it's not slimy. I would say there's a way to cook it so it's a little bit less slimy. But I've seen that slime so bad, you pull the leaf out of the pot, and the slime just runs all the way down into the pot. So anyway, but with the bananas, it's beautiful. It's delicious. That's one of my favorite foods, right in that pot right there. This is they serve out. This is a potluck. Here we have potluck. Everybody goes to your line, kind of get whatever you want. There, what they do is everybody brings their own plate. You're expected to bring your own plate to potluck and your own spoon. They don't provide anything like that. If you don't have a plate, you go get a banana leaf and you bring the banana leaf, and they'll put food on the banana leaf for you. But there's no silverware provided and no eating utensils. So they'll just take and they'll put food on your plates, and then they'll separate the plates out. And if it's a larger feast, what they do is they take the food and put it in the larger pots. Now you'll notice a larger one right here and a larger one up on the top. What they'll do is they'll put food in those larger pots, and then every family will take their own. And they'll just eat out of the pot, however they want to do that. So for larger feasts, yeah. And then anything else I want to point out? I'll just zip through here a little faster. So this is a church service, and they're using the school. I built this school years ago. That's one of the last things I did before we left New Guinea. And you notice there's no walls, and the reason there's no walls is because it is so hot. So we wanted to increase the chance of getting breeze. They built a new school, more classrooms just to that direction. I think I may have a picture with those shows classrooms in the corner. But we built a couple of teachers' houses. We built this school. There's actually, if you look on that far side beyond the red wall, there's a classroom down that way. And on this side, beyond this wall, there's another classroom along this way. And they have this huge space in the middle where they have classes, and they can teach one side that way, one side this way. They were going to put a wall down the middle, but that never happened. But anyway, they use it for assembly. They use it for church services, which we did on this particular day. And we began to work with the Kimea, one tribal group, and then we helped start work over among the Tuatapi, which is the tribal group to the south. But here we've got people from probably at least four different tribal groups. So our work has expanded. It's gone to south, the southwest. And so there's several different tribal groups here, which was encouraging. I enjoyed seeing that. Another picture. My wife with the ladies in a ladies' meeting. Classroom. I just wanted to show you the desks. They have a few store-bought desks in the floor right in front of me here. Beyond those are the desks that we built, really, that our villagers built. I didn't. Very simple. They just took a chainsaw out in the forest, cut a tree down, cut big slabs out of the tree with the chainsaw, and then spiked them together, and that's their desk. So the ones that were store-bought, they probably got donated from somewhere. And as you can see, they have a few challenges. I noticed some of them, there were no boards left. It was just a little piece of pipe. But anyway. But they, in spite of the fact that they don't have fancy classrooms, we've had so many students come to me and say, look, I'm in university now because I was able to start school down there. Or I'm going to become a doctor now because I was able to start school down there. So it's encouraging to me just to see hundreds and hundreds of kids, able to go to school, and get an education, not because the school building is so fancy and so updated, and but because there's teachers that are willing to teach them. And so that's, quality teachers, I tell you. There's the students, and you'll see some of the students are older, some of them are younger. When they have church, what they do is the men are on one side, women are on the other side, and then the kids are often in the front. And I've seen churches where there's like probably 100 kids sitting on the front, and then you've got all the adults on the side. Okay, zip through here again. This is still the Kukia Ipa. This is my wife and I's village. So we're standing on the trail coming into the village. You see the forest is all around there, and that school is right there in the forest. You've got the help me, ladies. You've got the teachers' houses on that side. No, this is the teachers' houses are actually over here off the picture, and that's the school. The building I built first is way on the back. And then you have the newer built classrooms in the front. But if you look at it, the point I wanted to make was that school is in the middle of the rainforest. This is not a town school. It's in the middle of nowhere. Town, if you want to go to town, you're driving for hours and hours. So it's not a town church. So we're shifted now. We'll leave that project. We landed in the Gogodala, which is the western province. You cross the Gulf to get over there. But we arrived, and some of you emailed me and said, "Hey, listen, we heard about the landslide. Are you anywhere near the landslide?" Well, they had unprecedented amount of rain, and we're talking about a place that gets a lot of rain anyway. Where we live, they got 12 feet of rain a year, not inches, 12 feet. The northern part of the island, where we'll be going after this stop, they normally get 22 feet of rain a year. So we're talking about lots of water. And down here, it's quite normal for the water level and the river to go up and down, like it happens, right? They get lots of water. And if you look, I don't have a stick long enough, but yeah, I could do that. You see if I point at something, you're not going to know what I'm pointing at. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this, and you just watch and see if I can't make a pointer out of it. Okay. All right. So that's bamboo right there. That's bamboo, bamboo, bamboo. Do you know what this tree is here? Coconut. Yeah. And this is the boathouse. It's normally on land. The water level is usually the other side of that bamboo right there. And that grass strip right there, that's the other side of the river. So you'll notice the place looks slightly wetter than normal. Yeah, and this is a place where it normally floods. So this is like the water level now is much, they said, higher than ever before on record. They keep records. They have watermarks. They mark the water. They find ways of like cutting a mark in the bark of a tree or, they do that just to record how high the water is. And they've got old people there that have been around for a long time. This is a little different area than where we live. These people live longer. And they're saying, look, we have never, ever, ever seen water this high. And it was still rising. So the boathouse, it went from being way above water on a little partway up a hill to being covered. And you see the little Goodson's welcome there on the trail. They did that with flowers. They got all the flowers and gave us a welcome. But anyway, walk up this trail, and we have... Oops, okay, it's all right. This is a boat. When I go shopping, I bring my food back in the car. In New Guinea, we had to use, when we first got there, we had to use a PMV, and then we had to use a boat, and then we had to use a four-wheel drive to get our supplies to the house. And my friend here, he buys them, puts them in a container, takes them over to the ship, and then the ship hauls his food over to his house. He does that 2-3 times a year. So that's how he gets his goods. So I just thought I'd take a picture of that. He built this center. This is the missionary Steve Erickson, good friend of mine. He built this because he wanted a place that would encourage and support discipleship. Now, we have churches, and we often use churches purely for the sake of worship. He wanted a place that wouldn't just be used for worship. He wanted a place that would be used for discipleship. He could train people to get out and work. They could meet there and there. They could develop skills in there. They could educate people. They wanted like an education center and a place where they could develop new skills. They built this center to support that. And I'm proud of him for it. He did a great job. And hundreds of people come here. And they really like the place. They like the fact. And the union came and said, this is the first time anybody's built a discipleship center in the country. Is there of any denomination? So they were really excited that there's, just to think that we're actually going to head in the right direction here. So, all right, so that's that building. And when I was there, I did training on our project, did training here. And we spent days asking questions like, okay, so do you understand the doctrine? We went through the doctrines and tried to understand what doctrines they understand and which ones they find confusing. On the third project, we discovered that of the 28 doctrines, how many do you think that they understood? Now, we're talking about members of the church that have been members for decades, right? And so we were just trying to figure out how many of the doctrines they understand. Of the 28, they understand 4. Okay. And the problem is, like what we mentioned before with the circles, that people have expressed doctrines the way they make the most sense to Americans, as opposed to expressing the doctrines the way they make the most sense to Papua New Guineans, right? And we answer the questions that Americans ask. We don't answer the questions that local people ask. So it's just we need to go back and reframe. And so I was just trying to figure out, okay, what do we need to do to make them clearer, to help people to know what. So after you accept a doctrine, say, okay, that makes sense. The next question is, okay, what are you going to do with it? So I can say, okay, I need to, maybe I need to quit drinking. Okay, so we answer another question. Okay, what kind of discipleship support will you need to apply that? Well, I'm going to need someone to help me because I tried drinking 3 times and I can't do it, right? So I'm going to need some discipleship assistance with that. So we're not just saying, okay, how do we make sure we clarify the doctrine, but what kind of discipleship support will they need once they decide we're going to embrace that doctrine? So, we spent days here. And I would love to spend an hour just discussing what we discussed there and what we learned there, but that'll be for a different day. So we left that place, and we traveled out, and that's what this area looks like with the high water, right? And I think I have one more picture. Oh man. This picture is supposed to show you an island right here. And there's a house on that island. It's surrounded by water. Anyway, just trust me. There's a small village. I'll get my pointer out here. There's a small village I'm not quite tall, right there. See the roof of the house? See the roof? That little shiny thing right there. That's the roof of the house. There's a roof of a house right there. Yeah. So, and there's a roof of a house right there. I can tell you because I know this place. I've looked at this picture before, and I was prepared to show you. There's another house right there and right there. See the roof of their houses, and there was one more right there. Anyway, I said it was flooded. You can get a feel for what it looks like. And these houses are normally on top of like little hills. Water doesn't normally get up that high, but certainly this time it did. So that's a picture of a terminal, for the airport terminal. And just a little tiny building there. And the white roof you see behind it's a whole different building. This is that little green thing is the terminal. Another terminal, I took a picture of it at another on my camera. I didn't move them over here. The door in front of the entrance, there was like huge mud pit in front of the entrance, so they couldn't use that. They had to use the cargo entrance, which is the door was about this high, so you had to if you wanted to get inside the terminal to get your tickets and check your luggage in, you had to go through that little cargo entrance. And I won't tell you the whole story, but my wife has a permanent reminder of that cargo entrance. Anyway, this little guy wasn't feeling good one day. I sat down It's at the mission office on our way from the second project to the third. We stopped at the mission office. And that little guy, he just wanted to talk to me for a few minutes. So I sat down and we had a little heart-to-heart. And then he went on his business and I went on to mine. So this is up in the CPIC now. We've traveled. It's unfair to just jump so fast. But we've flown from the capital city to Wewak, which is the provincial capital. We got on a truck and we drove for 6 or 7 hours. We got to Pogwe, which is there's a wharf, a bank of a river. We pick up a boat and we went for hours and hours with two outboard motors, 240, I think a 40 and a 60 horse outboard motor pushing us up the river. And so we finally got up there. We're talking about like a 150-mile trip or something up the water. So these are some of our church leaders. And what they're holding in their hands are waterproof Bibles. A year ago, we discovered how few of them actually had Bibles because it gets so much rain. If you go to preach somewhere and they don't have plastic, like how do they take care of their, so their Bibles just get wet and destroyed. And so these are waterproof Bibles. A friend of ours in Oregon, over by Enterprise, he purchased these, and they were so excited. You can actually take that Bible, lay it in the river, and it will float down the river for a day, and somebody else can pick it up, shake the water off, and it's perfect. Yeah, it does not get ruined by water. So they were just so happy. They actually have a Bible that's actually made for their environment. So. Yeah, this is what you normally see. You see it every once in a while. You'll see a few iron roofed houses, but most of what you see is what's on the bottom down here. The little grass roofed buildings like this. And I took a few of these pictures because some of you heard there was an earthquake several months ago, and the earthquake, a lot of houses fell. And this is right where the chaos took place. We went right by that. And there's a number of houses that had fallen down. And, yes, there's supposed to be another picture of that. I don't know what happened to that one. Okay, so I want to tell you a story. And it's 12:30. I can wait till next week if you prefer. So when we went to the CPIC, we were heading from the provincial capital out to the project site. We were told that the highway was closed because there had been a tribal fight take place. And so you have two tribes fighting, killing each other, and attacking the police cruisers. And so we couldn't get through. So we were praying that the Lord would help resolve that so we could actually get through and get to the project. And he did. Highway was open. We drove through. We got up to CPIC River. We went up all the way up to May River. We had our meetings. And then we began working our way down. So we left a day early because we had heard rumors get going. We had heard that the tribal fight had resumed and the road was blocked again. We were no longer able to get through. And so we were trying to figure out, okay, so if we can't get through, how do we get home? Like, that's the road. And it's not like the United States, well, this road to go around, you have a detour, we'll go around that one. There's one road. And then I found out, okay, no, there is another road, but it's like days like this way, and and it's not a good road. It's full of potholes and bandits, and you don't want to go that way. And then I found out, okay, there's a company who does some logging, and we'd have to go down the river 3 hours more to get to the logging camp, and then they have a logging road that maybe we could use. So we were just trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to do this? And if you're 3 hours further down the road, it's another half a drum of fuel, and we've only got, if you only have one drum, it takes a whole drum to get down to where we normally get out. We're just trying to process all the things we have to process to figure out how do we get out of here. So then I said, let's leave it half a day early, and we'll be at least we'll have extra time to work with because we had to get an airline out. We had already had our tickets purchased, So we left early. And on the way, we're like if we're heading way out here in the Sepik, we come down. We're trying to get to Pogwe. We stop along the side of the river. And I noticed this massive raft. This guy has made 3 canoes that's probably as long as this sanctuary here, right? 3 huge canoes. And he's built a deck across them. And he's got 44 drums of fuel on that deck. And there's room for more. He probably has room for another 50. Whether it'll hold 50, I don't know, but there's plenty of space. It's a huge contraption. And he's got 5 outboard motors pushing it. And so I started asking a few questions, and they began talking to me about this guy and this huge business that he's got. And as they're talking, I'm thinking, wait a second, I just read this book that talks about patrons and clients. Patrons own huge tracts of land, and clients live on their land, right? And as he began talking this story, I think he is a classic example of a patron. And but while we were in May River, this is like just before we back up a few hours, I was talking to the guys up there, and we were talking about doctrines, and I asked the question, give me an example of a doctrine that you don't understand or that you have trouble with. And they said, well, I said, one, you do understand. They said, well, we understand creation. That's easy to understand. He says, but we don't allow creation, that belief, to replace our traditional belief. I said, why? I said, you believe both of them at the same time? He said, yes. Why? He said, because of our traditional belief that man came from, different animals, right? Spirit animals. This is like way back at the very beginning. Spirit animals gave us life. And when they gave us life, they also gave us responsibilities. Like this clan over here, they have the responsibility of taking care of people if they get bit by a poisonous snake. This clan over here, they have the responsibility of managing crocodiles so they don't bite and eat people. And if they do, to discipline them, right? Because there's a spirit inside that crocodile. They have to manage that. And it said another clan over here, they have the responsibility given to them at our version of creation to manage the land. And so the oldest son, that responsibility was handed down until the current generation, that everybody lives on land owned and managed by some of these managers that were given that responsibility back in their version of creation. They have land disputes all the time, right? Managing the borders, and they protect them, and all this huge, complex, system of protecting the land. If Steve wants to go hunting, he hunts on my land. I tell him, okay, you can hunt on my land. He wants to build a house. I said, yeah, you can get your trees over here, and you can build your house over here. That's fine. He said, I need a garden. Well, you can garden over here. Like, I manage all that, right? And so the landowners, they're the what keep the entire country in check. Now, something most people don't understand, if you had $100 million and you went to Papua New Guinea and you wanted to buy a single acre of land, you couldn't do it. You can't buy land. It's in the hand of traditional owners. All of it. It's in the law. You cannot buy land. Even the national capital is on leased land. Because you can't buy land. It belongs to the traditional people. You can't take it away from them. And so they said, if we embrace the biblical account of creation, it totally, destroys the entire landowner system throughout their whole district. And every tribe has got their own version of, creation where land came from. But they were just saying, look, if we embrace 100% the biblical account and get rid of our traditional account, then we have nothing but chaos. People will be fighting and killing. It'll be crazy, just trying to deal with the bedlam that would result from the disturbance of that land system. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that one of the things that I realize more and more is that it's one thing to present doctrines. It's another thing to ask the question, what are people doing with it, and how does that doctrine impact not just the individual but the community? Right? We have to ask those kinds of questions. Right? So anyway, with that in mind, understanding that the patron-client relationship where you've got whole villages living on the land owned by one man, we get down here, find this huge raft, and find out it's the same guy. He gave us free lodging. Because the other missionary I was with travels on his trucks that he uses to take people from the provincial capital to the wharf. And his deal, he does what a patron does. He said, if you utilize my business services, then the hotel is free. So if you're traveling on his vehicles, his boats and his vehicles, then you get up here to this place of lodging, it's free lodging. Yes. Okay, the motel had 24-hour electricity and 24-hour mosquitoes, a beautiful outhouse from the outside, and they swept the floor for us before we got there. When we arrived, they swept the floor. Basically it's just a square box and it was hot. It was super hot, like super hot. But there was a light in there. You did have a light. So basically you sleep on the floor and you've got a light you can turn on and off if you want to. So thank you. So he does what a patron does. We can stay at this place. And then then we heard that the highway was closed. But the next morning, one of the workers, I said, no, it's open, but not for us. It's only open for people with small vehicles, but not for the traditional PMV, which is a public motor vehicle, the big trucks, the open back trucks that ply the roads, right? So we can't go. And it was because there was a squabble between the tribe where the patron owned this huge raft with all the fuel. He also owned the fuel depot, like on a big wire cage with the drummers back there. Like he did his business out of the big wire cage on the beach, right there where we would normally land. He did his business there. He owned this massive tract of land. Thousands of people lived on his land. Thousands of them. And he managed it. And that's his crocodile skull. And it's been highly decorated. If you wanted to buy that, you'd be thousands and thousands of dollars, I'm sure. And so here's a picture of the fellow right there. And so he managed this huge land, the business, that huge raft traveled way upriver to sell fuel to people that needed it, and then way downriver, because if it takes a whole drum of fuel just to get to the wharf so you can get the town to buy fuel, how in the world could you afford to buy 2 gallons? Most people don't have money to buy a drum. They only buy like a gallon just to get a short distance. And they can't afford to go to the gas station to get it because it would cost him $1,000 to buy a gallon of gas. So he plies the rivers and he sells people fuel. So he's got that business. He has the PMV business. He owns a land. He's got the little free hotel where we stayed. And when we pulled up to the place where we normally would buy fuel, our drum was empty. It had 1 gallon of fuel left. And we got to the beach there. Nobody was there. Normally, there's vehicles all over the place. There's people, there's ladies, there's kids running around. They're selling stuff all over the place. It's empty except for warriors with weapons. And I'm not going to describe them, but they had weapons there that would shoot massive darts that would penetrate bulletproof vests without even blinking, right? So they're armed to the gills, right? They're fully armed, and they're the only ones on the beach. So we showed up and looked around and realized we're probably not welcome here. And began, trying to figure out, okay, what do we do now? We don't have any more fuel. So we got out and just said, look, this is the problem. We need fuel. And said, okay, we'll get you some fuel. And the ladies need to use the bathroom. Says, okay. So they were able to use the bathroom. You had to walk over like this swampy thing with little boards on little posts. You'd walk on those like a little sidewalk to get through the swamp to get to the outhouse. And when you pooped in there or peed or whatever you did, we just dropped in the water that was underneath the outhouse and floated down to, so that was, anyway. So But it was a free service, which we were grateful for. I mean, but anyway, so this is the guy that owned all that. And these young guys served him. Like all those warriors out there, when he needs help, all the young people come because they live on his land. He's like a little king there. They don't call him a king, but that's essentially what he is. He's like a little king there, and everybody lives on his land. They owe everything to him, so they're trying to help him out. And I spent some time talking with him, not a lot because we were in a hurry, but he at least let me see his crocodile skull. He's got two of them. There's one up on that shelf up there, and there's one on the shelf right here that they got down. And he showed me they had the miniature model of the lethal weapon, and they had these 8-foot launchers that would shoot these massive darts. So we talked with him, and he explained to me, he said, you know why this big battle is going on, this big tribal fight? I said, why? He says, because somebody claimed that somebody in our tribe stole their cell phone. It was like a $30 item. And people have been killed already, and he said the amount of damage that has been caused by that, they don't even have proof. They're just blaming us for that. But he said that's what's happened. Anyway, I was thinking about him, his land ownership, and what it means to protect the land, and their version of creation. What would happen if you didn't have somebody trying to oversee, trying to settle this dispute? And he's trying to get it settled. Anyway, it's crazy. So we ended up getting the fuel. We went down 3 hours further down the river, and eventually made our way down other roads and got back to town and able to make our way back. So I'm going to stop this. I'll show you another picture there. There's one of the houses that collapsed during the earthquake, and there's my wife and I. That's what we look like. This is proof that we're on the river. That's the Seapic River there, and we're just, trying to enjoy the ride as much as possible. I just want you to know we did go there. We represented you there. We left a check to help with the church building, and I just realized I did not put a picture of the church building here. I'll try to get that for you next week. Somebody sent me a text, remind me you owe us a church building picture. So, but I did drop the check off. They were happy to see that. And I just want you to know that God's work is moving here. It's working over there too, but the work looks different. And we need to continue praying that God will prosper the work that's been begun over there. Thank you. It's because it is late. Let me just have a word. Lord God, it's a privilege to be here. It's a privilege to work for you here and abroad. It's our prayer, all of us, Lord, that we can be effective, not just in telling people what we believe, but helping them to understand your greatness, your goodness, and in discipling them, helping to know how to actually take what you've taught us and live by that. We pray that you would change us on the inside, our worldviews, the way we think, as well as guide us in the way we actually live our cultural lives. We would honor you all the time in all places. And Lord, when you come, that there be more people ready to meet you because of our existence. For Christ's sake, amen. You have to do that kind of carefully, don't you?
We're good.
God is good.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, hi.